At 6:04 p.m. on June 24, 2026, Maria Gonzalez was doing what millions of Venezuelans were doing that evening, sitting at a table surrounded by family, laughing, eating, celebrating a national holiday. 60 seconds later, she was standing in the middle of a street she no longer recognized, covered in plaster dust, holding her daughter so tightly the child couldn't breathe, staring at the place where her apartment building used to be. 60 seconds. That's all it took to change Venezuela forever. What happened on the evening of June 24th wasn't just an earthquake, it was two earthquakes, striking 40 seconds apart, each one powerful enough to be the defining disaster of a generation. Together, they produced the strongest seismic event ever recorded on Venezuelan soil. Stronger than anything the country had experienced in more than 125 years. And it struck at the worst possible moment. Not during the dead of night, when streets are empty and buildings are quiet. Not on a random Tuesday, when offices are half full and schools are letting out. It struck on a public holiday, at dinner time, when every apartment, every family home, every restaurant and plaza was packed with people. When millions of Venezuelans, already living through years of economic collapse, already exhausted from a decade of hardship, were finally allowing themselves one afternoon of rest. The ground took that from them too. To understand what happened on June 24th, you need to understand something most people don't know about Venezuela. This is not Chile. This is not Japan. This is not a country built on the expectation of catastrophic earthquakes. The buildings lining the streets of Caracas were not designed with the kind of seismic resilience that Pacific Rim nations spend billions constructing. The population had no generational memory of shaking like this, no instinctive drill, no cultural reflex. Venezuela sits at a tectonic boundary most of the world has never heard of. The collision zone between the Caribbean plate and the South American plate. Running along the entire northern coast of the country for 1,300 kilometers lies the Boconó-Morón-El Pilar fault system, a network of right lateral strike-slip faults that geologists have long identified as capable of producing major seismic events. It had just never done so in living memory, until now. The disaster unfolded within a triangular zone bounded by three fault systems simultaneously activated: the Boconó Fault to the south, the Oca and Con Fault to the north, the Bucaramanga-Santa Marta Fault to the west. Seismologists described what happened in those 40 seconds as a cascading rupture, a seismic chain reaction so rare and so violent that even the scientists who studied this fault had not modeled it at this scale. The first rupture came at 6:04 p.m. Magnitude 7.2. Epicenter near San Felipe, capital of Yaracuy State, 160 kilometers west of Caracas. Depth 22 kilometers, deep enough that the wave would travel far, wide enough that no corner of the northern region would be spared. People felt it and did what people do in an earthquake they've never experienced before. They froze. They looked at each other. They grabbed the edge of a table. They said, "Is this an earthquake?" And then, 40 seconds later, before the first wave had even finished moving through the earth, the second rupture came. Magnitude 7.5. Centered just southeast of the town of Umar, also in Yaracuy State, but shallower, much shallower, only 10 kilometers deep, which meant the energy had almost nowhere to dissipate before it reached the surface, which meant what hit Caracas next wasn't a warning. It was the full force of one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in South American history, delivered directly with almost no geological cushion between the fault and the street. In the neighborhood of Los Palos Grandes, a man named Eduardo was on the phone with his brother in Madrid when the second quake hit. The call dropped. His brother would not hear from him for 11 hours. In Altamira, a woman named Carmen had just put her 2 children to bed for an early nap before the evening celebrations when the ceiling of their bedroom came through. She pulled them out from under it with her bare hands. Both children survived. Carmen broke 3 fingers she didn't notice until the following morning. In the municipality of Chacao, a restaurant owner named José Luis was wiping down the bar when the bottles started falling. By the time he reached the door frame, the wall behind him had already separated from the floor. These are not statistics. These are the 60 seconds that changed everything. The scenes in Caracas in the minutes following the second quake were unlike anything the city had witnessed in modern history. Buildings that had stood for decades swayed, buckled, and gave way. Entire facades peeled off apartment blocks, exposing the interiors. Bedrooms, kitchens, living rooms, to the open air like a dollhouse split down the middle. Dust clouds rose above neighborhoods faster than smoke, swallowing streets in a gray haze so thick that people running through it couldn't see their own hands. People poured into the streets by the thousands, many of them barefoot, many of them with nothing, no phone, no wallet, no shoes, no understanding of what had just happened to their city. Parents clutching children, children clutching pets, elderly residents sitting on curbs with nowhere to go and no ability to go there. The sound was unlike anything survivors described from any previous experience. Not just the rumbling of the earth, but the sustained cracking, groaning, and collapse of concrete and steel that continued long after the shaking stopped. In one section of southeastern Caracas, reports indicated that nearly every high-rise structure in the immediate vicinity was either catastrophically damaged or had completely collapsed. A major bank building in the capital came down. Emergency vehicles couldn't reach the worst affected zones because the streets themselves were no longer passable. Rubble, fallen electric poles, displaced sections of road blocking every possible route. And then the aftershocks began. Within 2 hours of the main event, 6 distinct aftershocks had already been felt across Caracas. Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello went on national television and said something that sent a wave of secondary panic through a city already in chaos. He told every resident, "Do not go back inside your buildings." He wasn't being cautious. He was being accurate. In the wake of a double rupture of this magnitude, structures already cracked, already shifted off their foundations, already compromised in ways their residents couldn't see. Those structures were not safe. A modest aftershock, the kind that would barely register in a city like Tokyo, was capable of finishing what the main quakes had started. Hundreds of thousands of people spent that night outside, on streets covered in debris, in parks, on the hoods of cars, families sitting in circles on the grass of plazas, watching the skyline of their city with a kind of dazed, uncomprehending grief, waiting for aftershocks they could feel but couldn't predict, watching smoke rise from places where fires had started in the dark. Gas supplies had been shut off across multiple districts immediately after the first quake. Electrical power was gone across large sections of the capital. Cell phone signal, already unreliable in a country with crumbling telecommunications infrastructure, was almost entirely absent in the worst hit zones. For the more than 7.5 million Venezuelans living abroad who had emigrated during years of economic collapse and were now frantically trying to reach family members back home, those hours of silence were something close to unbearable. Simon Bolivar International Airport sustained significant structural damage and was shut down completely. All arriving and departing flights were suspended. The footage that emerged from inside the terminal, debris falling from the ceiling, passengers running, terminal infrastructure visibly cracked and displaced, was among the first imagery to reach the outside world and signal the true scale of what had happened. Hospitals mobilized under conditions that were, by any measure, impossible. The Hospital de Clínicas in Caracas, its own infrastructure damaged, its corridors darkened, ceiling panels hanging loose, plaster across the floors, was asked to double its overnight staff within hours of the quake. Emergency workers were receiving patients in hallways. Doctors were making triage decisions in near darkness with whatever supplies were immediately available. The injured arriving at hospital doors were not a trickle, they were a flood. And still the rescue teams were only beginning to reach the collapsed buildings where people were trapped under the rubble. In the municipality of Chacao alone, just one district of a city of several million, more than 500 emergency personnel were deployed for search and rescue operations. The math of what that means in practice is staggering. 500 people searching the wreckage of an earthquake that struck at dinner time on a public holiday, when buildings were full, when people were gathered indoors, when no one had been warned, calling out names, pressing their ears to concrete, following the sound of voices coming from places that no longer had floors. Acting Venezuelan President Delcy Rodriguez addressed the nation that evening in a state emergency declaration. She confirmed what everyone already knew, that people had died. She confirmed that hundreds of emergency workers were deployed. She called for national unity. But unity in a country already fractured by years of political crisis, economic collapse, and social fragmentation is easier declared than achieved. Venezuela in 2026 is not a country with robust disaster infrastructure. It is not a country with reserves to draw on, stockpiles to distribute, or systems that function at scale under ordinary conditions, let alone catastrophic ones. The earthquake didn't just strike a city. It struck a city that was already, in many ways, holding itself together with almost nothing. The shaking was felt far beyond Venezuela's borders. In Colombia, residents across the Caribbean and northeastern regions felt the tremors move through their buildings. No injuries, no significant damage, but the sensation was undeniable. In Brazil, the Amazon cities of Manaus, Belém, and Macapá were evacuated as a precaution as the seismic waves arrived. Buildings swayed in cities more than 1,000 kilometers from the epicenter. The international response began within hours. The United States pledged immediate deployment of search and rescue teams, medical personnel, and humanitarian supplies. The U.S. Embassy in Caracas confirmed all staff accounted for and issued guidance to American citizens in-country to seek shelter and stay away from damaged structures. Other governments and international organizations began mobilizing. The scale of what Venezuela was facing, a country with pre-existing humanitarian vulnerabilities absorbing a double earthquake event of historic magnitude, meant that the disaster response would need to be massive, sustained, and coordinated across agencies and borders simultaneously. But here is what the news coverage won't tell you. Here is the thing that gets lost when a disaster of this scale becomes a story about numbers and politics and international pledges. Maria Gonzalez, the woman from the beginning of this story, the one standing in the street holding her daughter in the plaster dust, she had lived in her apartment building for 14 years. She knew which step on the staircase creaked. She knew which neighbor played music too loud on Sunday mornings. She knew the view from her kitchen window at exactly the right angle would catch the mountains at sunset. All of that is gone. And what she told a journalist the following morning, while still sitting on the same street corner where the second quake had found her, was something seismologists and emergency managers and government officials don't tend to say in press conferences. She said, "I never thought it would happen to us. We always thought that kind of thing happened somewhere else." That sentence, that exact sentence, has been spoken by survivors of every major earthquake, in every country, in every language, across the entire recorded history of seismic disaster. The belief that catastrophe lives somewhere else, that your city, your building, your family exists in a different category. June 24, 2026 removed that belief from millions of Venezuelans in 60 seconds. The fault is still there. The Caribbean plate is still pressing northward against the South American plate at the same rate it always has. The Boconó-El Pilar fault system is 1,300 kilometers long, and it did not finish moving on June 24th. Seismologists are careful with their language about what comes next. They speak in probabilities, in historical averages, in recurrence intervals. What they will say on the record is this: what happened in Venezuela on June 24th was not the kind of event that announces itself in advance. It was the kind of event that reminds a civilization, any civilization, that the ground beneath it is not as permanent as it appears. Venezuela will rebuild. It always has. But the rebuilt city, whenever it comes, will be built by people who now carry something in their bodies that no engineering standard can design around. The memory of 60 seconds that changed everything. And somewhere in Caracas tonight, in a street, in a shelter, on a piece of ground where a building used to be, someone is listening for the next sound.